It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my unbreakable co-host, Brett.
That was good, Alice. I'm always so impressed by your ability to, do those puns. They're just so
on
great.
The spot. Because yet again, Brett, I'm sorry, it's not about you. It's not about you today at all. It is about our amazing guest. We have today with us Robert Palmer from the Broken System podcast. So I am so delighted to have him here to talk about an incredibly important case that is all over the news if you've been following it, and that's the case of DJ Fickey. So Robert, thank you for joining us today. We are just so happy to have you join us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, before we get started, you're joining us late at night. You said after your bedtime. So thank you so much for doing that so that our kids are quiet and people can hear us. But how did you get started on your podcast, and kind of just give us a little background of who you are, your podcast, and where people can listen to? Because I know after today's episode, people are going to be flocking to your podcast if they haven't already been listening.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm Robert, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. About 2 years ago, I had been listening to podcasts, obviously true crime, for forever. And I started listening to a podcast and was almost put aback by it. I'm not going to mention what it was, but just the way that they treated individuals and treated the family and just kind of the whole situation. And I felt just a kind of need to do it myself, and started researching and looking at cases. And I with the way everything was going, I was kind of going to do the normal different episode every week type thing. And I came across DJ's case, and it just kind of pulled me into it, if that makes sense. And I'd listened to, obviously I went and Amanda had done really good, and Amanda's DJ's sister. She had done really good about getting his name out there and getting him on other podcasts. But it was that 30 and 45-minute podcast. And the more that I read and the more that I listened and the more that I heard, I wanted to make sure that his story got out there, because it deserves so much more than just, a 45-minute podcast. So I went in, I got in touch with Amanda and asked her permission, first of all, made sure it was something that she wanted to do, and she was all for it, and kind of started that journey at that point in time. And, just kind of crazy since then.
What an incredible platform you've created for DJ's story. And I know there are several people here listening today who may not even know DJ's story. So I'm really excited that we're able to introduce our audience to your podcast, and also the work you've done in getting DJ's story out there and the developments that are happening really as we speak.
Yep, absolutely. And that was the one thing. And, and Amanda said, her comment to me was, if only one person listens to your podcast, it's one more person that didn't know about it. And I found, really that even though it had a wide spread, it was out there, there's still a lot of people that didn't know. I'm glad I was been able to tell the story. And I know Amanda's on, I just see her comment there as well. So we're going to make sure that DJ has his justice. And that's the most important thing, is getting the family some closure, because they really not had time to grieve. Amanda's been fighting this for 7 years. DJ's very lucky to have her, and she's an amazing person.
So as you said, this is something that happened 7 years ago. For people out there who are listening who don't really know DJ's story, can you give us a sort of a short synopsis of what happened, the immediate aftermath of the event, how things kind of went sideways, and where we are now?
Long story short, there was a known drug house in Walker County, Georgia. And, unfortunately, DJ was into that kind of lifestyle, and it happens. And him and his wife were staying at this place, and she had gotten into a relationship with someone else that lived there. This was a small trailer home in Walker County. There was probably 10 to 12 people living there, just that kind of environment. Police, it had been a regular basis type situation. Police are out there constantly arresting people, things like that. And on the day of the incident, it happened about I think it was 1:15 in the afternoon. DJ had reached out to some of his family and said, "Hey, I need you to come get me. I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel safe. Something's going to happen to me if I stay here." And the last text message, within 3 minutes from that, a 911 call was made in regards to a suicide call. Marshall, I can say his name now. For a long time, we hid his name, but he made the 911 call. And during that 911 call, multiple things happened. If you listen to the 911 calls, and when you go through the season, you'll hear it. If you listen to it the first time, you just think he's just really panicked, and it's kind of, a situation, if something just happened, okay, he's panicked. But as you go in and you start listening to these 911 calls, you hear things in the background. You hear people talking, you hear people moving, and you hear things being said. The phone, every time DJ's wife would get very expressive about what happened, she would start screaming. He would disconnect the 911 call. So they called back. That happened 3 different times before the police showed up. But in this, you can hear all of this stuff happening in the background. And supposedly from that point, there was only DJ, Marshall, and his wife, Brandy, that were at the house. That's, everything that was conveyed to the 911, conveyed to the police. Well, when the police get there, there's another individual and his wife there, but they said they just showed up after everything. So this is the situation goes into it. The police come in. It's a small town in Georgia, very small. They have, a coroner, but they don't have a medical examiner. Coroner comes in. Once again, he's told, hey, it's a suicide. That's what it was called in as. Coroner comes in, sends the body to the GBI for an autopsy. When he sends the body, he states, obviously, it was a suicide. The body goes to the GBI. It's a very new medical examiner that's working for the GBI. She gets everything. Obviously, she looks at everything. And this is all happening within a matter of, a week after this stuff had happened. The police officer is there on scene. As he's there, you can tell with his statements and the things that are happening that Marshall's statements are changing during this time. It goes from one thing to, he just adds stuff, or he changes his story just a little bit. And you hear this throughout the whole time that it happens. So GBI is over here doing their thing. Within a week, she sends everything back saying, oh, suicide, that's how it is. Walker County's investigating it. They're starting to realize, oh no, this is more than a suicide. And then it gets into an issue of, okay, this is more than a suicide. GBI's ruled it as a suicide, and they've started looking at everything as a suicide, but now they're seeing that there's other things that have happened. So they start investigating, and they get further and further into it. Once again, you can see through the interrogation with Marshall from the very beginning. There's a number of interrogations. There's a lie detector polygraph that was given. It goes through everything. He absolutely fails it. The sheriff officer that administer it, you can hear him tell the other officer he failed. Let's bring him back in. Let's see what he has to say. They question him about it. His story changes. During these interviews, it's about a 7-hour interview process. During that, his story changes probably 4 or 5 different times. And his narrative changes to fit the questions that are being asked. So every time something's brought up, oh, this is what happened. This is the reason why it happened that way. So in some of that talk, you can hear him say, okay, the gun was in the back. We were talking about putting the gun away. We needed to put it because DJ was talking about suicide. And a lot of his narrative when he talks to everybody is, well, DJ was talking about suicide. DJ was talking about suicide. Nobody else ever heard that other than him in his statements.
I know at one point he also talks about struggling with the gun, like DJ has the gun and they're struggling with it. Did anybody ever say they saw that or witnessed that, or was that purely sort of his story?
So that was, so originally his story was, I was in the back room, I came out, I saw DJ shoot himself. And then when he was talking to the 911 operator, he said he picked the gun up so that way he was able to put his fingerprints on the gun and all of that kind of stuff. And then as he's talking to the police, oh, I shot a gun the day before. Could I have gunshot residue on my hands? That type of stuff. But yes, so at that night, everything happened that afternoon. The police came in, they did their stuff. They were gone in 2 to 3 hours. That was their whole investigation. They left Brandy, his wife, there. And she was just, she was in shock, still at basically, where everything happened at, didn't know what to say, was scared, was afraid to say anything to the police officers while they were there. One of these other, part of the couple that came up was sitting with her when the police were trying to talk to her. So she was afraid to tell them what they said. So the moment she could get out of there, as soon as she got out of there, she contacted them and then went and told, basically the exact story of what happened, which was he came out with a gun, put it up, DJ tried to grab it away, and it went off.
So let me ask you this. It seems like the locals had a pretty good idea fairly early that this wasn't actually a suicide, that there was more to it. But that was 7 years ago. So what explains the fact that, and just to sort of jump ahead and sort of give it away, I guess, at this point, they have adjusted that. They now say it was a murder. And in fact, they've arrested this Marshall fellow. But that was just this year. So what is it that took 7 years to get from the police now realize there's a lot more to this to now we're finally moving forward? I don't understand. I don't understand the delay, I guess.
So, outside view looking in from my view, it came into a point that it was territorial. A lot of it was GBI, that medical examiner that did that was just absolutely very difficult in changing her, being willing to go back and say, hey, maybe I didn't do everything right. Let me change this. And, to be honest with you, the sheriff for Walker County is an asshole. Sorry, excuse my language. It was a known drug house. In his mind, it wasn't. Honestly, I felt like they felt as if they let it go away, that it would just go away, but they didn't realize that Amanda was so headstrong and stubborn, and she'll say it herself, is that she was not going to let this go because that's not what happened. And the detective actually sent it to the prosecutor, to the DA, which once again, DA had been in office for 30 years or a long time. Many, there's some cases that happened, that things were, showed some corrupt issues that were in throughout the office and things like that. And that's, basically the letter that he sent back to the sheriff's detective was, there's not enough evidence for us to move forward.
And thank you for that explanation, because I think what you said, you kind of given the spectrum of reasons why there could have been a delay. But, I'm hearing multiple things. I'm hearing possibly as simple as just wanting to dig your heels in and not say that you did something wrong. It's a lot of, this sounds terrible, but it's true, administrative work to change your opinion. And there's a lot of effort that goes into it. And then on top of that, and I think this is incredibly important, and you touch on this beautifully in your podcast, is that he could have been a forgotten one, right? He could have been part of a population that was simply not sympathetic. It didn't grab the headlines. It could be easy to toss him into that's a known drug house. And can we ever know what really happened at the drug house? Or do people care? And that is a devastating thing to say about any victim, but is a reality. And I think that's incredibly important to highlight what you just said, because I do think that's important. And What we have here, though, is, of course, Amanda, his sister, who, as you said, was not going to let this go. For those who are listening and who truly, when they know a case intimately, whether it's someone they know or some case that they've been invested in, can you, kind of extrapolate a little bit more as to what Amanda was able to do to move the needle in those 7 years? Many people would have given up in 7 years. And I love that Amanda is here, listening in as well. But not everyone is able to effectively kind of fight back on, the big law enforcement, get people to change their minds, get people to look deeper or to take that extra investigative step. So I'd love to hear, what she did and how it actually made a difference in this case.
Basically she did the, very first thing she did was she dug her heels in and said, I'm not going away. And she went out there and she spoke to every news agency she could find, everyone that would talk to her. She reached out to every podcast that would, reach back. She went to CrimeCon. She went through CrimeCon and put herself out there. And that's one thing that she'll say is that she's not that kind of person. She's not that extrovert that goes out and just is, a people person that loves crowds, but she did it. She went into that and she made sure to put his story out there. She started a Facebook group. It grew. And she started a GoFundMe, a change.org, and with those things. And then she also, Eric Eccles is a private investigator that donated his time to her and the family that really made a very big impact. He was able to get a lot of things done and pushed in the right direction. And during that time, they were able to, have conversations with a medical examiner. One of the funniest things is she was very adamant about going on Facebook and Twitter and finding the head of the GBI and commenting and things like this. And I think one of the big turning points for that is that I believe that he ended up blocking her. and it's not, I don't think because he's a public servant, he's not allowed to do that. And when she called him out on that, he apologized and said, okay, let's have a conversation. They actually went in and she was able to sit down with him and she put the case out there. And by doing that, that's what started that ball rolling to change the death certificate from suicide to undetermined. And once that happened, that pushed everything. That happened. And then, she just stayed in the forefront with the district attorney. So the old district attorney retired and new younger district attorney came in. She was able, he's a great guy. He actually cares. And you can see that the reasoning and he understands what happened and kind of didn't dismiss her. He listened to it. He took everything in, and that's kind of where it went today. It pushed to where they were able to take it in front of a grand jury and get an indictment.
So, the thing that's sort of, I don't know, I got a lot of thoughts. I mean, it's great, obviously, that DJ had Amanda, but a lot of people, particularly people in DJ's, shoes, don't have anybody. And it's really supposed to be, or at least the way I view it, the prosecutors and the police who are standing sort of in the breach for people who don't have anybody. And it's distressing that it seems like none of those people were that interested in doing anything about this case, even though they had their own doubts. And you and I talked about this before you came on here. It is not unusual to have a suicide where the family truly believes it wasn't a suicide for whatever reason. And, we've seen those cases. And a lot of times, I would even say most of the time, when you really look at them, you realize there was just a lot going on in this person's life. And in fact, it was a suicide. And it's as tragic and terrible as it is, that's going to have to be the final answer. And then you have this case where that's not the case, where in fact, there was evidence very early on that the police were aware of and just did nothing with. And was it really just sort of personnel as policy? And once the people changed, all of a sudden, the prosecutors and the police, all of a sudden they were doing what they were supposed to be doing and standing up for this? Or was there like a piece of evidence that came out? What was sort of the triggering event that turned this from, this is going to be sort of a cold case forever, to we're arresting someone and moving forward with the prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence, everything that we've put out there has been from day one, you know, and and I say this, and I don't mean it in a lot of times when a suicide happens, and I've had people reach out to me because, you know, this pulls on, and they've had the same kind of situations happen to them, and they want me to look at it and say, hey, can you do for me what you're doing for DJ? I'm like, yeah, sure, send me what you get. And they have a 3-page, you know, it's very, very small. So the thing with this, and I say that it was unfortunate, but because it was ruled a suicide so quickly, Amanda was able to get all of the case files and see everything so early that there was no doubt in her mind that there was no way, shape, and form that she was ever going to let this go. She wanted to make sure that everyone understood what she was seeing, what she heard, and what, you know, it wasn't just her being that family member saying, oh, you know, my brother didn't do that. She had it all in front of her.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible to hear that all of the evidence that led to the indictment this year was already there. So this isn't a situation where DNA had to be sent off. We were waiting for testing to come back. We were waiting for some witness who was to the wind to be found, to be interviewed. You're saying everything was from day one, and it truly was personnel and Amanda's advocacy. If she
Yes.
weren't out there with the evidence that everyone had from day one, this would not have happened this year. And that's absolutely incredible to me. And what's incredible as well, and I want to make sure I get to this because I know people will be wondering how the files were turned over to Amanda, because I think every state may be different. I want to just also comment on how incredible Amanda is to be able to go through these case files, which can be very technical. They can be written in jargon, law enforcement jargon, medical jargon, and be able to analyze it better than clearly the prosecutors and investigators in the case, and see through kind of all of the noise and see key pieces of evidence that clearly was strong enough to lead to an indictment today. That is a skill that, frankly, lawyers have to be trained to do. And I mean, Amanda brings to this obviously her love and utter dedication to DJ, but this is not an easy thing to do. So I want to underline how incredible it is that she takes a case file that is not written for the public, and it's not written for public consumption per se. It's really written for like internal notes, and was able to see the case even through all of that kind of medical legalese jargon. But with that, how was she able to get these files? Did she request them? Or in a case of suicide, is it always turned over to family members? And which family members can it go to?
Everything was done through a FOIA request. So she was able to get everything. Once it was ruled a suicide, she was able to request everything and get all of the documents.
And just to be clear, I believe this is the case, but correct me if I'm wrong. The reason she was able to FOIA those documents after it was ruled a suicide is because if it was a suicide, there was not an active investigation, and therefore there was no holdback evidence for deliberative or investigative purposes. And so FOIA didn't have an exemption to keep those documents undercover. Is that right?
Exactly. They did. The only thing they did is they did, you know, obviously redact some of the personal information, but pretty much everything else is there.
Gotcha. So she basically took a bad situation, which is where the investigators jumped to a conclusion too quickly, and turned it around for her purposes for FOIA, and was able to truly take a bad situation and make the best of it, and then turn around the situation based on their mistake. Because if they kept it as an open homicide cold case, she still wouldn't be able to get those files.
Absolutely. Yep. She would have hit that brick wall. So, and at that point in time, you know, she would have just been fighting against that feeling of, okay, this isn't right. I know what happened, but when she's able to get all of that to her, she's got everything in front of her saying, look, why are you guys, I don't understand why you're not looking at this the same way as these other 100 people that are looking at this now are.
So I'm still kind of dumbfounded by this. So I want to walk through some of this. So DJ died in October of 2016. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And shortly thereafter, almost immediately thereafter, it sounds like it was ruled a suicide.
Yes. Within the first
month or so, couple months. But then at some point it changed from suicide to undetermined. When did that happen?
That happened in 2018.
Okay, so it took another year and a half for it to go to undetermined.
Yes.
And when it went to undetermined, you mentioned the medical examiner with GBI. What was the position of the medical examiner with GBI at that time? Was it the same medical examiner who had ruled it a suicide, or had someone else come in at that point?
A different medical examiner changed that. But, 2020 is when it was changed. I'm sorry, Amanda got me right there. When it was changed to undetermined. So it was a different medical examiner at that point in time. The other medical examiner is still there. And when she was questioned, she really stuck by her guns and said it was still a suicide. And even to the point of when they did and it's kind of funny, and I don't mean to laugh, but when they did a drug screen and took the drug screen, and she said because he had methamphetamines in his system, she couldn't rule it anything other than a suicide. That if he had that's exactly my
like
thought
a bright
too.
line rule.
Yeah.
So you can't murder someone who's on methamphetamine?
That seems like a really big loophole.
That's when I heard it, I'm like, did she really just say that? and that's suicide by meth is what Jason said. But yeah, so because he was on meth, it couldn't have been a homicide. It had to be suicide because he could have defended himself, is what she said.
So that was in 2000.
In 2020.
In 20, sorry.
Yep.
Too far back. Then in 2022, it's moved from undetermined to a homicide.
I don't believe that it was ever moved to a homicide. It was until I believe they're still, it still shows on his death certificate as undetermined, but they took the evidence to the grand jury finally in April of this year. And that's when the grand jury indicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've indicted, I think I saw something like malice murder.
So in Georgia, they have two different types of murder, basically. Felony, it's a felony murder, and it is malice, I believe. So the felony in Georgia is commissioned during a crime, and then the malice is basically, just without regards.
And going forward, I mean, now we have an indictment. We have someone who's been charged. Presumably, we're looking forward towards a trial. I know, these things are going around. Apparently, there's a gag order in this case. I kind of hope that eventually gag orders get taken to the Supreme Court and they get, if not struck down, severely limited, because it seems like every judge in every case started putting a gag order on cases, and I think that's ridiculous. But so they're moving forward towards a trial. Let me ask you this, and you may not know the answer to this, but one thing that immediately concerns me, just listening to what you've said, if I'm the defense attorney, I'm subpoenaing medical examiner one, the sheriff, the coroner, are they going to just basically parade in everybody who ever said this was a suicide and use them as witnesses? Or have those people also sort of come around to we made a mistake?
The sheriff, I don't think the sheriff would be involved. The detective that was involved from the beginning, he from the beginning, pretty much around January, after everything happened, the murder happened in October. January of the next year is kind of when he was still digging into all of this. And I think, I don't know that he would say that it was murder, but I think it's a type of manslaughter, I think is how he put it, because he doesn't think, I think he said that he didn't think that he intentionally pulled the trigger, but he did go out there with the gun to intimidate. So I think that police officer would still back that up. The detective would. So I don't think that's an issue. And
I'm sorry, just to make sure I understand, he would testify that the current defendant didn't mean to pull the trigger, or that DJ didn't mean to pull the trigger.
No, that the defendant he would testify that it was a homicide.
I gotcha. He would testify that it's a homicide.
He would absolutely testify. Yep.
But he thinks it was some sort of accidental homicide.
Yes.
Basically.
Yep.
Okay.
But moving away from the suicide, which was the original.
That's the most important thing.
Okay.
But yes, it's gonna get very sticky outside of it. I really don't know that. I believe he'll plead guilty. That's just my belief. It could be totally different. A lot of weird things have happened just, since So he was given $100,000 bail, and he made bail last week.
Mm-hmm.
The just goes back to the crappiness of it's kind of a slap in the face to Amanda and the family.
Sure.
But then the victim's advocates didn't even call them to let them know that he made bail. She had to find out from somebody else. So, it just kind of goes back to the kind of, shoddiness of everything. And so, there's fear there that, okay, now he's out on bail. What's he going to do? Is he going to run? Is he going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Is he, so we just want to make sure that he's at trial when it happens and either pleads guilty or gets found guilty. So,
And when is trial currently set for?
November 6th is the next court date. So I would imagine, I don't know if that'll happen.
Sometime after.
Sometime after that. Yeah.
Okay. In other words, it's still relatively early in the case, since he was just indicted in April.
Yep.
He just made bail. So this is all very interesting. There's obviously a lot we don't know, I guess, because of the gag order. But if what Brett said happens, and I have no doubt that if I'm a defense attorney, I'm certainly going to dig up all the people who can, who have an interest, even if it's a selfish interest, to defend their original decision to call this a suicide, because human beings are kind of self-interested, right? Even if they have facts in front of them, they don't want to be the wrong one. So they don't care that they're there at a murder trial. They're still going to want to say that they didn't make a mistake. And if that is, this trial could if the trial happens, could very well turn into kind of a trial of the system, right? Of the change in guard of the exact same evidence, same evidence viewed by two different sets of people, one resulting in indictment and the other ruling it a suicide. And it will be very interesting how the jury accepts that kind of debate. It's kind of a meta debate that rises above what this case is about. And what an incredible legacy, if that is even a conversation we start to have because of DJ, right? DJ was lost much, much too young, but because of your podcast, because of Amanda's advocacy, because of the justice that we hope that will happen in his case may actually end up being a broader metaphysical debate of the system, that he had to give his life for that type of a debate. But in thinking about the types of questions and the type of internal reflection that his case may bring is the silver lining I'm trying to see from all of this, because it seems so senseless that we haven't had any, revelation since he passed away 7 years ago.
And that's the hope. And I think that as his kids get older and learn and understand what happened, and if DJ is able to help one other person because of what happened to him, and it ends up fixing something in the system that was broken because of what happened to him, then I think that's a win for the family, especially to be able to say, look, this happened. Unfortunately, we lost DJ, but because this happened, we were able to make sure that this was fixed, that it didn't happen to the next 5 people that this, situation happened to. Because that's what's concerning is that when you look into it, so you've got Amanda who dug her heels in and said, I'm not letting this go. How many other people in that county just kind of threw their hands up and said, I can't handle this, or just said, it is what it is. That's what happened. We believe them. So we're going to go by what they say. So that's kind of the scary part. Is where does it stop? Is it because of the drug situation that they looked at it differently? Or is it because of just whatever reason, and how many other people are going to have to suffer because of that?
And I think it's definitely the case that if there were no Amanda, there would be no charge. I don't think there's any question
absolutely.
about that.
Yeah, it absolutely. If she wasn't there calling and being on the forefront of this and talking about DJ every day and making it the most important thing and I think she wants to make sure that his children know that what happened, and they were there in court and they looked at the man in the eyes when, they know.
I think this is so important, and you've already touched on this yourself, Robert, and I appreciate you doing this. But, DJ is so much more than what happened to him. He had a wife, he has kids, he has a family, including Amanda, who love him dearly. And Amanda, in the chat, please feel free to tell us more about DJ. But, we've talked a lot about what's happened, since DJ's passing and the legal issues and the investigation around him. But can you tell us a little bit about DJ, that, he had kids, that he had a life? How old was he when he passed away?
DJ was 27, and he had a boy and two twin girls. And they were, Amanda, how old were they?
I know they were very young.
Yeah, I believe 4 and 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to the prosecutor in this case too, not to be self-aggrandizing for prosecutors, because I do think this is obviously a brave guy who's willing to take on a tough case, because this is not an easy case by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be tough, and I think there are a lot of prosecutors who probably would not have wanted to take it for that reason. I think they would have said, look, there's evidence here, but with this prior finding of suicide, what chance do we have? And then not even move forward. So I do want to give a shout out to him for moving forward. Just briefly, to recap sort of what it sounds like the evidence is going to be in this case. So you have his inconsistent statements. He's the one who called 911. I assume his fingerprints are on the shotgun because he says he was struggling with a shotgun at the time.
They never fingerprinted it.
Okay. But he puts the shotgun in his own hands because
Yes.
He says we were struggling with the gun. He says that DJ said he was suicidal, but the other witnesses are going to say he never said that. You have the text message from DJ saying, come pick me up. I'm concerned about these people. And is there anything else other than that? I guess was there gunpowder residue on his hands, or did they ever even test it?
They didn't test, because he said, because he put himself there with his hands, that he picked the gun up and moved it. That was, he made sure to, he said it in the 911 call.
I heard the 911 call where he says that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he made sure to tell the detective, that was one of the first things. What he said though was, the 911 caller the 911 operator told me to move the gun.
Which isn't true.
Which isn't true. Well, they did after he admitted that he touched it.
Right.
And, it was, that's kind of funny that I talked to Brandon from Music City, and he explained that to me, is that because that was when I heard that originally in the 911 call, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe she told them to actually move the gun. But, he explained to me that as soon as he admitted to have touching it, that it's that point that she wants to get it safe for the officers that are coming. Mm-hmm. So that kind of cleared that up. But he made sure it was very pointed to say, she told me to move the gun instead of saying I moved it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this gun was a shotgun, correct?
Yeah, it was a sawed-off shotgun.
Oh, it was sawed off. Okay.
Sawed off,
so
yeah.
Maybe a little bit easier to use in a suicide than a typical shotgun.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, and Amanda has helped us with the ages of his kids. I believe one of his children was 2 and the twins were 1. So truly just babies when he passed. And 27, my goodness. I mean, that's such a young age. And, whatever he had going on at that time, he had a lot of life ahead of him. He had his family with him, who clearly still love him very much, and to have him robbed of that life so early is just a travesty. And I can't thank you enough, Robert, for giving attention to DJ and to Amanda for allowing, all of us to be talking about DJ. I know it is absolutely the family's prerogative when they don't want to be the subject of podcasts or don't want to be talked about. But thank you, Amanda, for allowing us to be able to learn about his case, to spread his case to more listeners so that people are aware of his case, especially as it's, moving towards trial and hopefully ultimate justice for DJ. And Robert, thank you for doing your podcast, The Broken System. All of you can listen to it anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's a fantastic listen. Robert is here with us today talking about DJ Fickey, and you can also hear it directly from his podcast, The Broken System Podcast. Robert, is there anything else you'd like to add, either about your podcast or DJ or the family or this case before we sign off for today?
The main thing for me, as I've said it before, is I'm just a storyteller. Amanda's the hero in this. She's the one that did everything. She's the one that made this possible. And she's the one that like I said, she dug her heels in, and she made sure that nobody was going to forget DJ. And, and I'm here to tell the story and just help get that out there. And what I want to be able to do is years to come, is I want people to be able to come back to my podcast and be able to hear the story from start to finish, and to understand what happened and why the system got broken. And that's the whole key, is that was the biggest thing for me, is that I named my podcast and then found this case, and it truly reflects that the system was truly broken when all of this happened, because everything should have slowed down. Everybody should have been treated the same. And I feel like just because it was in a bad area, socioeconomics really played a factor in this, and that's got to be fixed.
Absolutely. And thank you for giving a voice to that. Like you said, the beauty of our justice system at its peak is that justice is blind. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's supposed to be equally applied to all. And so thank you for your podcast in bringing that to light and having this discussion through DJ's case for us, because I truly still hold that, very, very close to my heart. And both Brett and I, we try to view our jobs that way. Justice is blind. It doesn't matter who you are. You deserve justice as long as we are the ones working on the case. But we know that is not necessarily the case everywhere around the world, and not around this country as well. So thank you. Thank you. Brett, is there anything else you'd like to add about the Broken System podcast or DJ's case before we sign off?
Just thank you for doing this, Robert. Thanks for shining a light on it. I think something we've talked about a lot, and something you talk about in your podcast, is that and as Alice has said, DJ was more than what happened to him, and he was more than any addictions he might have struggled with. And the struggles he had didn't make him less of a person, and it didn't mean that he didn't deserve justice, and that he wasn't someone that the justice system needed to find justice for. And I'm glad that he had such a great advocate for him and his sister, that's going to happen. And I hope that because of him, there will be some people who don't have sisters who are willing to fight for them, who, the system itself will do its job and step in and do that. So thank you so much for bringing that to light and really highlighting that very important point.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me and letting us be able to, spread the word about DJ's case and getting it out there. That's, that's my most important thing, is just, one more person to hear it, one more person to listen to it, is hopefully one more person that may not have this happen to them.
Absolutely. And so if you are hearing about DJ's case for the first time here, please make sure to check out the Broken System podcast and also be following developments, because as you all heard, a person was just indicted and it will be moving towards trial. If we have any updates, we will certainly do another legal briefs on it.
Awesome.
And yeah, absolutely. And we'd love to talk to you again, Robert, if there are additional developments or anything
Absolutely.
we can do to help get his story out there, highlight whatever is happening in his case. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Amanda, DJ's sister. And thank you all for listening. And please go check out the Broken System podcast. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Oh, okay. Sounds
So don't do anything yet.
okay. No brilliance being said over here.
Yeah, just
you don't have to worry about that.
Y'all, entertain yourselves. Sorry, Robert, we're not very sophisticated or.
Trust me, this is the best for me.
So Robert, tell me about your office. Is it like attached to your home, or how did you
It
move
is.
to your offices?
So I moved to a new house. So once I did that, I got into a separate office space. So it was a little bit bigger. So it made everything kind of much louder.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.